Hey guys, hopefully you are doing well and you were able to have a good extended weekend here. If this is your first day back, if not, you'll be about midway through the week anyway, so even closer to the weekend. Okay, so we are going to jump right back in with Romeo and Juliet here. This is going to be Act 1, Scene 3. Act 1, Scene 3. So you should have read it through as a class, whether you did it aloud or individually. And we're just going to go through before we do anything else. Hopefully, you looked back over some of your notes beforehand, so you reminded yourself of what was going on. But I am just going to jump back to the notes right here. And this is part of the reason we take these because sometimes there are going to be really big breaks like this in between, and you'll completely lose track of where you were at. So just look back at your notes. Scene 1, we have the servants start fighting. Remember, we've got the Montagues on the one side, Capulets on the other side. These are great houses, so they have a lot of money and influence in the city of Verona. Benvolio, the house of Montague, that's Romeo's side. He tries to stop the fight. Tybalt, who's on Capulet's side, Juliet's side, keeps it going. The fight expands, it gets really big. Then the prince comes down, remember, and he levels his decree. And his decree, if you guys remember, is that the next person that starts the fight in his streets, he is going to have executed. So he says, whoever breaks the peace next, your life will pay the price of the peace. So basically, he's going to execute whoever starts the next fight. Romeo, remember, is being dramatic because he's not getting any from Rosaline, who he's interested in. And then Benvolio tells him to get over it. After this, we find out at the beginning of scene 2, Paris, who is related to the prince. Remember, if we go back to our character list, we've got royalty, Prince Aeschylus, and Paris. I'm actually going to put cousin on here too. You guys know he is a cousin of the prince. So he is interested in marrying Juliet Capulet, who is 13, which kind of gross, but at the time this was pretty normal. Let's see here. And then Capulet tells him, she's only 13 years old. Wait, give it a couple years. But we are going to be throwing a party soon, and you are invited to come and meet Juliet. So this would kind of be the first step in their courting process. If Paris and Juliet are going to get married, which of course we know the play is called Romeo and Juliet, but at this point, that's kind of Paris's plan, is he's interested. Capulet says, wait a little bit, come to the party, get to know her a little bit more, and then we'll talk. He says, give it 2 more summers, right? So 2 more years. Wait till she's the ripe old age of 15, and then she's all yours. All right. At the very end of the scene, Romeo and Benvolio find out about the feast. Remember, the servant comes up and gives them the invitation to read because the servant can't read. Romeo reads it, finds out about it. They decide to sneak into the feast, even though they are Montagues and they're not welcome. They decide to go. Benvolio, he wants to take Romeo because he wants Romeo to meet another girl so he can get over Rosaline. Romeo wants to go to see Rosaline and show Benvolio she is clearly the most beautiful of everyone at the party. All right, so we are going to jump right back in here to scene 3. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit more. There we go. Hopefully you guys can see that. So Capulet's house. So this is in the house of Capulet. So we've got Capulet's wife and nurse. The nurse is one we haven't had yet. She is also on Capulet's side. A little background about the nurse. At this point in time, here's a picture of them, which will kind of give you an idea of what they're like. Actually, this is a really good likeness. So at this point in time, Capulet, Lady Capulet, would have married Lord Capulet when she was very young, probably also about 13 to 15 years old. So there's a really big age gap between the two of them. So she would have had Juliet also when she was still pretty young. This is where the nurse comes in. So the nurse essentially was the one who raised Juliet. So she would have been the one that put in all the time. She spent the most amount of time with her, kind of going through everything and basically raising her day to day. Lady Capulet would have come in for like major events in her life to get her ready for parties like this, which is what she's going to be doing in this scene. But generally, the nurse is the one who raised her. We're going to find out a little bit more about everybody's kind of dynamics here as well in this scene. All right, so enter Capulet's wife and nurse. Lady Capulet is looking for her daughter, and the nurse says a lot of stuff that can be really confusing. The nurse is kind of the comic relief, or she's supposed to be the comic relief in this play. She's supposed to be a little bit stupid. She talks a lot. That's one of her things. She talks a lot and she basically says nothing. She says the same thing over and over and over again. You'll notice she repeats a lot of lines. Let's see here. What a lamb, what a ladybird. Where's this girl? What? Juliet. Juliet shows up. Enter Juliet. Juliet's wondering who's calling for her. And then Lady Capulet tells her, this is the matter. Nurse, give leave a while, or you can leave us for a little while so we can talk. I'm going to adjust that real quick. We must talk in secret. The nurse starts to leave, and Lady Capulet says right away, Nurse, come back again. I have remembered me, thou hear our counsel, thou knowest my daughters of a pretty age. So basically, the nurse starts to leave, and Lady Capulet hasn't been alone with her own daughter very much because the nurse raised her. So she kind of calls her back. She's a little bit uncomfortable with this. All right, and so she starts talking to the nurse. Lady Capulet mentions she's not 14. And then the nurse launches into this whole really long story that I'm not going to go through. It is a little bit dirty too, so if you were able to read it and understand what was going on, good on you, but it doesn't have much to do with the story. This just establishes the nurse is really long-winded. So she loves to talk, and she loves to talk about nothing. And you know that because at the end, Lady Capulet says, enough of this, I pray thee, hold thy peace. So stop talking, be quiet. The nurse, as you can see from this long chunk right here, also does not listen to that and keeps talking. And then it's stinted and said, I. Juliet says she's basically telling an embarrassing story about Juliet when she was really young. Juliet says, and stint thou too, I pray thee, nurse, say I. So also, please stop talking. Juliet and her mom have both asked the nurse to stop talking. The nurse kind of wraps it up. And I might live to see thee married once, talking to Juliet. So she wants to live to see her married. I have my wish. Lady Capulet says, Mary, that Mary is the very theme I came to talk of. Tell me, daughter Juliet, how stands your dispositions to be married? So she's asking Juliet, what do you think about being married? Juliet says, it is an honor that I dream not of. So she hasn't even thought about it yet. So we're going to jump back to the notes real quick. Let's see here. Lady Capulet brings up marriage, Juliet, and we'll get there in just a second. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. The nurse is very excited about the marriage. She is this is kind of her whole goal is to get Juliet raised up well so that she's a desirable wife for somebody else. So the nurse is thrilled, at the ripe age of 13, that Juliet could be considering marriage. Let's see here. Lady Capulet says, well, think of marriage now. Younger than you here in Verona, ladies of esteem are made already mothers, which is what we already talked about with Paris and Lord Capulet, that young girls younger than Juliet, so younger than 13, were already married and already had kids. She also says, by my count, I was your mother much upon these years that you are now a maid. So by the time Lady Capulet was 13, she had already had Juliet, which kind of explains why the nurse was there, because a 13-year-old is really going to kind of struggle to raise a baby on their own. It happens, but that's why the nurse is there, and that's why Lady Capulet relies on her so much, and Juliet as well. All right, and she mentions the valiant Paris seeks you for his love. The nurse also is very excited about the choice of Paris. She says he's a man of wax. And if you look over here, it means he's he's as handsome as a wax figure. But the nurse is kind of dumb too. So it also, if you read into it a little bit more, means that he's not necessarily, there's no personality. He's kind of a good looking guy, but he's kind of shallow. Lady Capulet and the nurse keep on saying how nice he is. And then Lady Capulet says, what say you? Mentions the feast, the party that's going to be that night. You're going to meet him there. What do you think about it? Let's see here. And Juliet says, right here, I'll look to like if looking liking move, which is a little bit of a tongue twister, but no more deep will I indart mine eye, then your consent gives strength to make it fly. So Juliet basically says, I don't care. Just let me know what you want me to do. So Juliet just doesn't really care about being married. Doesn't care about marriage, but she says she'll do whatever her parents want. Doesn't care about marriage. I'm going to put a comma there. Semicolon. Will do what her parents want. All right. And that is the end of that right there. They're starting to get ready for the party. So the servant walks in and says, everything's going crazy. People are cursing in the pantry, everything in extremity. And he says, I need your help. And then everybody leaves. So that's the end of that scene. All right. So that is it for that one. We're going to wrap it up, and I will see you guys on scene 4.